The communication screen flickered with static before going completely black. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stared at the dead display, his hands gripping the armrests of his command chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. Just moments before, Governor Park So-jin had been speaking to him from her office on New Busan, the human colony 27 light-years from Earth. "We're seeing strange ships in orbit," she had said, her voice calm but worried. "They're not responding to our calls. Captain Lee Min-ho thinks they might be." Then the transmission cut out. Not gradually, not with interference, just gone, like someone had switched off a light. "Try to reconnect," Kim ordered his communications officer. "I'm trying, sir, but there's nothing." Complete silence from the New Busan system. Kim felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. New Busan had been humanity's most successful colony. 2.5 million people lived there, farming the rich soil and mining the valuable minerals. Families had built homes there. Children had been born there. It was supposed to be safe, far from the dangerous parts of the galaxy where the older alien races lived. On the bridge of the Earth Defense Command flagship, everyone worked quietly. They all knew what complete silence from a colony usually meant, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. "Sir," called Lieutenant Yoon from the sensor station. "Long-range sensors are picking up something from the New Busan system. Put it on the main screen." What they saw made everyone on the bridge stop breathing. Where New Busan's cities should have been, there were only glowing craters. The forests that had taken 15 years to grow were gone. The lakes that children had played in were boiling. The entire planet looked like it had been hit by 1,000. "Nuclear bombs!" "My God," whispered someone behind Kim. "They're all dead." Kim closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of Governor Park and her bright smile when she had visited Earth last year. She had been so proud of what they had built on New Busan. Now she was gone, along with everyone else. "Get me President Yoon." "Immediately," Kim said, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. "Priority 1 emergency channel." Minutes later, President Yoon Ji-woo appeared on the secure communication link from Earth. Her face was serious even before Kim gave her the news. Bad news traveled fast in the government circles, and she had probably already heard rumors. "How many survivors?" she asked immediately. "None, Madam President. Complete sterilization of the planet. Every living thing is gone." President Yoon was quiet for a long time. Behind her, Kim could see other government officials gathering. Defense of her. Minister Choi Dong-woo was there, looking grim. So was Fleet Admiral Bae Hyun-sik, the old warrior who had helped design Earth's defense plans. "Do we know who did this?" President Yoon asked. "The sensor data shows crystalline ship designs, sharp edges, organic curves. It matches what our deep space scouts have seen from the hegemony races." The hegemony. Everyone in human space knew that name, though most people tried not to think about it. They were the old alien races who had controlled the galaxy for thousands of years. Humans had been careful to stay away from their territory, building colonies only in the empty spaces. They didn't seem to want. "They gave no warning," Kim continued. "No demands, no communication. They just came and destroyed everything." President Yoon's jaw tightened. "I want a full cabinet meeting in 1 hour. Admiral Kim, return to Earth immediately. We need to decide how to respond to this." But Kim could already see something in her eyes that made him think the decision was already made. President Yoon was known for being calm and diplomatic. She had spent years trying to build peaceful relationships with alien traders. But she was also the daughter of a military family, and she understood that sometimes peace had to be defended with strength. After the call ended, Kim stood alone on his bridge, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, aliens had decided that human lives didn't matter. They had killed millions of innocent people without even trying to talk first. They probably thought humans would just accept it and stay quiet. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Back on Earth, President Yoon walked through the halls of the Global Defense Center, her footsteps echoing in the corridors. Staff members stepped aside as she passed, seeing the look on her face. Word was already spreading through the building. New Busan was gone. The aliens had finally made their move. In the secure conference room, the most powerful people in human space gathered around a polished table. Defense Minister Choi had files spread out in front of him. Fleet Admiral Bae was studying star charts. Intelligence Director Park sat quietly, her tablet full of reports about alien movements. "Tell me our options," President Yoon said without sitting down. "We could file a formal complaint with the Galactic Trade Council," suggested Foreign Minister Lee. "Demand an explanation." "They killed our people," interrupted Admiral Bay. 2.5 million souls turned to ash? What explanation could possibly matter? Defense Minister Choi leaned forward. "Our public fleet numbers about 3,000 ships. The hegemony has over 50,000, spread across dozens of star systems. A direct confrontation would be suicide." President Yoon nodded slowly. "What about our other assets?" The room went very quiet. Everyone knew what she was talking about, but it was dangerous to discuss even in this secure room. For decades, Earth had been preparing for exactly this day. Hidden shipyards in asteroid belts, secret training facilities on remote moons, weapons research that made their public technology look like toys. Admiral Bay cleared his throat. "Project. Deep Shield is ready for activation. All assets can be mobilized within 72 hours. How many ships?" 600,000 combat vessels. Fully crewed and supplied. The number hung in the air like a challenge to reality. 600,000 warships. It was more than any single force in galactic history. The hegemony's entire combined fleet was smaller than what Earth had built in secret. President Yoon finally sat down, her hands flat on the table. "They think we're just another young race to be pushed around. They think we'll bow our heads and accept their judgment." She looked around the room at each person. "Send a message to our allies. Tell them what happened at New Busan. Then activate Deep Shield. Every ship, every crew, every weapon we've built." "Madam President," said Foreign Minister Lee carefully, "once we reveal our true strength, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way." "Good," President Yoon said, her voice cold as space itself. "Let them see what happens when you murder human children in their beds. Let them learn what Earth does to those who think our lives are worthless." Outside the conference room windows, Earth's sun was setting. But across the solar system, hidden, bases were coming alive with activity. Ships that had waited in darkness for decades were powering up their engines. Crews who had trained their entire lives for this moment were reporting to their stations. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. Soon, they would understand the cost of that error. 3 days after New Busan died, the aliens finally decided to talk. Ambassador Kang Soo-bin was in her office on Europa Station when the message arrived. The Europa base was humanity's main contact point with alien traders, built inside the ice moon's protective shell. It was supposed to be neutral ground where different species could meet safely. The message came through the standard diplomatic channels, but there was nothing diplomatic about its tone. "The human species has exceeded acceptable expansion parameters," the translation system spoke in its flat, mechanical voice. "The settlement designated New Busan represented a violation of established galactic order. Corrective action has been taken. Further expansion beyond approved zones will result in additional corrections." Kang read the message 3 times, her anger growing with each word. Corrective action. They called genocide corrective action, like humans were some kind of problem that needed solving. The message was signed by High Consul Sektar of the Vorthak Hegemony Council. Kong knew that name. The Vorthaks were one of the oldest hegemony races, snake-like creatures who thought they owned the galaxy. They had been the ones to first contact humanity 50 years ago, offering limited trading rights in exchange for staying in designated areas. Humans had agreed because they were still learning about the galaxy. They thought cooperation was better than conflict. Now Kang understood how naive that had been. "Ma'am," her assistant called through the intercom, "there's a hegemony delegation requesting immediate meeting. They say it's urgent." Kang almost laughed. Now they wanted to meet urgently, after murdering millions of people. "Send them to conference room 1. I'll be there shortly." She took her time getting ready, making the aliens wait. When she finally entered the conference room, she found 3 beings waiting for her. The leader was clearly Vorthak, 7 feet tall, covered in golden scales, with eyes like black glass. The other, 2 were from species she didn't recognize, but they all had the same arrogant look that hegemony representatives always wore. "Ambassador Kang," the Vorthak said without standing, "I am High Consul Sektar. We are here to discuss the recent incident at your illegal colony." "Incident?" Kang kept her voice level. You mean the murder of 2.5 million innocent people? We prefer to call it a necessary adjustment. Your species was warned about expansion limits. The consequences of ignoring those limits should have been obvious. Kang stared at him for a long moment. She had dealt with alien arrogance before, but this was something else. This creature genuinely believed that human lives meant nothing. High Consul, she said carefully, I think you may have made a serious mistake. Sektar's head tilted in. What might have been amusement? Young species often think that way when they first encounter galactic reality. You will adapt, as others have. No, Kang said. I don't think we will. Before the alien could respond, the conference room doors opened and President Yoon walked in. She wasn't supposed to be on Europa Station, but there she was, flanked by Admiral Kim and Defense Minister Choi. The aliens looked surprised. They clearly hadn't expected Earth's top leadership to show up personally. High Consul Sektar, President Yoon said, taking a seat across from the aliens. Thank you for coming. This saves us the trouble of hunting you down. The Vorthak's scales rippled, a sign of irritation. President Yoon, your presence here is unnecessary. This matter can be resolved through normal diplomatic channels. Normal diplomacy ended when you turned New Busan into a crater, President, Yoon replied. Now we're discussing the consequences of your actions. Consequences? One of the other aliens spoke up, its voice buzzing strangely. You are a minor species with a handful of primitive ships. What consequences could you possibly impose? Admiral Kim smiled then, and Kang felt a chill run down her spine. She had never seen the Admiral smile like that before, like a predator, showing its teeth. Would you like to see our ships? Kim asked. The main screen in the conference room lit up, showing the space around Europa. At first, it looked normal. A few human patrol vessels, some cargo ships, the usual traffic. Then the view pulled back and back and back. Ships appeared everywhere. Not dozens, not hundreds. Thousands upon thousands of them, stretching out in perfect formations that filled the screen. Massive battleships that dwarfed anything in the human public fleet. Sleek destroyers that seemed to bend light around them. Carriers so large they looked like mobile cities. This is just our local defense fleet, Admiral Kim said casually. About 15,000 ships. We have larger forces elsewhere. The aliens stared at the screen in shock. Sektar's golden scales had turned pale yellow. Impossible, he whispered. Our intelligence shows you have barely 3,000 combat vessels. Your intelligence is 50 years out of date, President Yoon said. We've been busy. Defense Minister Choi activated another display. This is our industrial capacity. Shipyards hidden throughout the solar system and beyond. Weapons, factories built inside asteroids. Training facilities on remote moons. Everything we've built while you ignored us. The numbers scrolled across the screen. 600,000 combat ships, 50 million trained crew members, weapons that could crack planets, shields that could stop stellar fusion. Technology that made the hegemony's best ships look like ancient relics. While you were congratulating yourselves on controlling the galaxy, President Yoon continued, we were preparing for the day you would show your true nature. Congratulations, High Consul. That day has arrived. Sektar tried to regain his composure. Even if these numbers are real, you cannot challenge the entire hegemony. We control thousands of worlds. Our combined fleets will be swept away like dust, Admiral Kim interrupted. Your ships are old, your tactics are predictable, and your crews have never faced real opposition. Our people have trained their entire lives for this war. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. The other two aliens were whispering urgently to each other in their own languages. Sektar sat motionless, his black eyes reflecting the ship formations on the screen. What do you want? He finally asked. Justice, President Yoon said simply. Every being responsible for New Busan's destruction will be brought to trial. Every world that supported this act will face consequences. And the hegemony's stranglehold on galactic civilization ends today. You're talking about galactic war, Sektar hissed. Billions will die. Billions already live under your boot, Admiral Kim replied. How many species have you crushed? How many worlds have you sterilized? How many children have died because you decided their lives didn't matter? President Yoon stood up, and the others followed her lead. High Consul, you came here thinking you were delivering terms to a defeated enemy. Instead, you've just received humanity's declaration of war. I suggest you use whatever time you have left to prepare your defenses. This is madness, Sektar said, rising from his chair. The hegemony has ruled the galaxy for millennia. The natural order is about to change. President Yoon cut him off. The age of the hegemony is over. What comes next depends on how quickly you surrender. The aliens left without another word, their escorts hurrying them to their ship. Through the conference room windows, Kang watched their vessel accelerate, away from Europa, probably carrying news of humanity's impossible fleet back to hegemony space. How long do we have? She asked. Our ships are already moving, Admiral Kim replied. The first attacks begin in 18 hours. By the time their message reaches the hegemony capital, half their border systems will be under human control. President Yoon was still staring at the display of human ships. 50 years we waited. 50 years we prepared. 50 years we pretended to be weak while building the strongest force in galactic history. She turned to face the others. New Busan's children deserved to grow up and see the stars. Instead, they were murdered in their beds by creatures who thought human lives were worthless. Today, the galaxy learns what happens when you kill our children. Outside Europa Station, the human fleet began to move. 600,000 ships turning toward hegemony space like a tide of metal and fury. The greatest military force in galactic history was finally going to war. And somewhere in the cold vacuum between the stars, the ghosts of New Busan were about to be avenged. Fleet Admiral Bae Hyun-sik stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought Eternal Vengeance, watching the largest military force in galactic history prepare for war. Through the massive viewports, he could see ships stretching to the horizon in every direction. Battleships the size of cities, carriers that held thousands of fighters, destroyers that moved like hunting wolves through the formations. 600,000 ships, divided into battle groups commanded by humanity's finest officers. Vice Admiral Song Min-jung led the first attack fleet, 80,000 vessels designed for rapid strikes. Rear Admiral Lim Jae-hyuk commanded the siege forces, heavy ships built to crack fortress worlds. Commodore Shin Yu-jin controlled the Ghost Division, stealth ships that could appear and disappear like shadows. All fleets report ready for hyperspace jump, announced Captain O from the communications station. Bae nodded. Signal the fleet. Target Proxima Fortress. Jump in 3 minutes. The hegemony had built Proxima Fortress to guard their border with human space. It was supposed to be unbreakable, a massive space station surrounded by defensive platforms and protected by 50,000 alien ships. The fortress had never been attacked because everyone knew it was suicide to try. Today, everyone would learn that sometimes the impossible was just another word for inevitable. Hyperspace jump in 10 seconds, called the navigation officer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, jump. Space twisted around them as the human fleet entered hyperspace. In the strange realm between dimensions, 600,000 ships moved as one. Their courses calculated down to the microsecond. The journey to Proxima would take 6 hours. Time enough for the crews to make final preparations. On the bridge of the stealth destroyer Shadow Dancer, Commander Ko Yoon-seo checked her weapons one last time. Her ship was part of the Ghost Division, the first wave that would hit Proxima Fortress. While the aliens were still figuring out what was happening, Ko and her crews would strike at the heart of their defenses. All stealth systems green, reported her tactical officer. Cloaking field at maximum efficiency. Ko smiled. The stealth technology was humanity's greatest advantage. While the hegemony relied on massive ships and overwhelming firepower, humans had learned to make their vessels invisible, ghost ships that could strike without warning and vanish before the enemy could respond. Remember, Ko told her crew, we're not just fighting for victory today. We're fighting for the children of New Busan who will never see another sunrise. We're fighting to show the galaxy that human lives matter. 6 hours later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima system. Immediately, alien sensors detected the massive force and began screaming warnings across all frequencies. But it was already too late. Commodore Shin's Ghost Division had arrived 30 seconds early, materializing inside the hegemony formation like deadly phantoms. Ko's Shadow Dancer appeared directly behind a hegemony cruiser, her weapons already charged and ready. "Fire," Ko said quietly. The alien ship exploded in a ball of plasma before its crew even knew they were under attack. All around the fortress, similar explosions lit up the darkness as ghost ships struck at the confused defenders. "Enemy fleet engaging!" shouted the fortress commander, a massive creature called General Thokmar. "All ships, return fire! Find those human vessels!" But the human ships were already gone, fading back into invisibility after delivering their deadly strikes. The hegemony forces fired wildly at empty space, while Ko and her crews prepared for their next attack run. On the Eternal Vengeance, Admiral Bay watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. The first phase was working perfectly. The aliens were panicking, their neat formations breaking apart as commanders tried to find enemies they couldn't see. "Signal the main fleet," Bay ordered. "Begin the assault." The human battle line emerged from hyperspace in perfect order. 80,000 ships arranged in a formation that had been practiced 10,000 times in hidden training grounds. Each captain knew their role. Each crew had drilled until their responses were automatic. Vice Admiral Song's attack ships struck first, their weapons tearing through alien shields like paper. The hegemony had built their defenses to stop conventional attacks, but human weapons were anything but conventional. Particle beams that could burn through solid rock, missiles that could track targets across solar systems, plasma cannons that turned enemy ships into clouds of superheated gas. "Impossible!" General Thokmar roared as his defensive line crumbled. "Our shields should stop those weapons." But human technology had advanced far beyond what the hegemony understood. While the aliens had grown comfortable with their ancient systems, humanity had been innovating. Every weapon, every shield, every engine had been designed to be superior to anything the galaxy had seen before. Rear Admiral Lim's siege ships targeted the fortress itself. Their massive guns had been built for one purpose, to crack the strongest defenses in space. The first salvo shattered the station's outer ring. The second penetrated to the core. The third turned the mighty fortress into expanding debris. General Thokmar's last transmission was a plea for reinforcements, but there would be no help coming. Across the galaxy, other human fleets were striking simultaneously at dozens of targets. The carefully planned campaign was unfolding exactly as Earth's strategists had designed. On the bridge of the carrier New Dawn, Captain Ryu Sunmi launched her fighter squadrons. Thousands of small, fast ships poured out of the carrier bays like angry insects. Each fighter was piloted by someone who had been born and raised for this moment, the children of the secret colonies, trained from birth to be perfect warriors. The alien fighters that rose to meet them were hopelessly outclassed. Human pilots moved with inhuman precision, their enhanced reflexes and neural implants giving them advantages that no natural being could match. Within minutes, the space around Proxima was filled with the wreckage of hegemony ships. "All resistance has ceased," reported Commander Jang Ho-seok from the missile frigate Thunderstrike. "Fortress destroyed, enemy fleet eliminated, no human casualties." The battle had lasted 17 minutes. 50,000 alien ships and crew members were gone. The mighty Proxima fortress that had guarded the hegemony border for centuries was nothing but drifting metal. And the human fleet hadn't. "Lost a single vessel. Signal all ships," Admiral Bay commanded. "Prepare for the next jump. Target Vega Station." Across the galaxy, word of Proxima's destruction spread faster than light itself. On the hegemony capital world, Supreme Chancellor Keth Moran stared at the reports in disbelief. Proxima was gone. The humans had appeared from nowhere with a fleet that dwarfed anything in recorded history. "How many ships did they have?" Keth Moran demanded. "Intelligence estimates 600,000 combat vessels," replied his military advisor, Admiral Grixstock. "But that's impossible. No species has ever built such a force." "Apparently the humans have," Keth Moran said grimly. "Send an emissary. Immediately. Open negotiations. Offer them whatever they want." But even as the Chancellor spoke, his communication screens were lighting up with more reports. Human fleets had struck at Kepler Station. The defense platforms at Wolf 359 were burning. The mining worlds of the Tau Ceti system were under siege. Everywhere the hegemony had built their power, human ships were tearing it down. Admiral Grixthak's voice shook as he read the latest reports. They're hitting us simultaneously across 12 sectors. Our response fleets are being destroyed before they can even engage. It's like they know exactly where we'll be and when we'll be there. They did know. For 50 years, human intelligence agents had infiltrated hegemony space. They had mapped every fortress, every fleet movement, every defensive plan. When the war began, there were no secrets left to protect the aliens. On Earth, President Yoon stood in the Global Command Center, watching displays that showed the battle across the galaxy. Each red dot represented a hegemony stronghold. Each blue dot was a human fleet. The red dots were disappearing one by one as humanity's forces swept through enemy space. "Madam President," called Admiral Kim from his command station. "We're receiving surrender offers from 17 different hegemony worlds. They want to negotiate." "No negotiations," President Yoon replied without hesitation. "They showed no mercy to New Busan. We show no mercy to them. Continue the assault until every military target is destroyed." Defense Minister Choi approached with the latest casualty reports. "Our losses remain minimal. 3 ships damaged, no deaths. Enemy losses..." He paused, checking his numbers. Over 200,000 ships destroyed, approximately 15 million alien military personnel. The numbers were staggering, but President Yoon felt no satisfaction in them. Each enemy ship that died brought them closer to justice for New Busan. But it wouldn't bring back the children who had died on that distant world. "How long until we reach the capital?" she asked. "At current pace, 48 hours, Admiral Kim replied. "The hegemony is pulling back all their remaining forces to protect their home system. It will be their last stand." President Yoon nodded. "Send a message to all hegemony worlds. Tell them what happened to New Busan. Show them the images of our children dying. Let them understand why this war is happening." The Psychological Warfare Division had prepared a broadcast that would. The hegemony capital system was a fortress, unlike anything in the galaxy. 5 massive worlds orbited the ancient star, each one covered with cities that housed billions of aliens. Defense platforms filled the space between planets like a deadly web. Minefields stretched for millions of kilometers. The greatest fleet in hegemony history waited in perfect formation, 100,000 ships representing every species that served the old order. Supreme Chancellor Keth Morin stood in the command center on Hegemony Prime, his crystalline form reflecting the lights of the tactical displays. Around him, military leaders from a dozen species argued about defensive positions and evacuation plans. But Keth Morin knew the truth. There would be no evacuation. This was where the hegemony would make its final stand. "Sensor contacts detected at the system edge," announced Admiral Grixthak. "Human fleet emerging from hyperspace." "How many ships?" Keth Morin asked, though he already knew the answer would be terrible. "Approximately 15,000 vessels, sir. Much smaller than their other fleets." For a moment, hope flickered in the command center. 15,000 ships against 100,000. Perhaps the humans had overextended themselves. Perhaps this battle could still be won. That hope died when the human formation became visible on the tactical screens. Admiral Kim stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vengeance, studying the hegemony defenses with cold satisfaction. They had assembled everything they could spare, pulling ships from across their empire to protect their capital. It was impressive, in its way. It was also pointless. "Signal the fleet," Kim ordered. "Standard attack formation. Commodore Shin, begin the dance." The human ships moved like water flowing around stones. Where the hegemony had built rigid defensive lines, the humans flowed between them. Where the aliens had placed their strongest weapons, the humans simply weren't there. Commander Ko's stealth ships struck first, appearing inside the enemy formation like deadly ghosts. Her shadow dancer materialized beside a hegemony command ship, weapons already firing. The alien vessel exploded before its crew could even sound an alarm. All across the battlefield, similar strikes lit up the darkness. Ghost ships appeared, delivered death, and vanished again. The carefully planned hegemony defense began to crumble as command ships died and communication networks failed. "Impossible!" roared General Vector from his flagship. "Our sensors should detect their approach." But human stealth technology was beyond anything the hegemony had imagined. Ships that could bend light around themselves, becoming invisible to every sensor the aliens possessed. The ghosts of New Busan had returned, and they brought vengeance with them. Vice Admiral Song's attack fleet followed up the stealth strikes with overwhelming firepower. Her ships moved in perfect coordination, each vessel knowing exactly where the others would be. Advanced AI systems, developed in Earth's secret laboratories, allowed the human fleet to react faster than any biological mind could follow. The hegemony's ultimate weapon was a planet-killer cannon built into their largest space station. The massive gun could destroy entire worlds with a single shot. General Vector aimed it directly at Admiral Kim's flagship. "Fire the World Breaker," he commanded. The beam that emerged from the cannon could have boiled oceans, but when it reached the eternal vengeance, the human ship simply wasn't there anymore. For exactly 3 seconds, the massive vessel phased out of normal reality, becoming a ghost like the stealth ships. When it reappeared, it was directly behind the weapon platform. "Return fire," Admiral Kim said quietly. The eternal vengeance. His main guns spoke once. The Planet Killer station cracked like an egg, its pieces tumbling toward the surface of Hegemony Prime. General Vector's last sight was the surface of his homeworld rushing up to meet him. On the ground, the war was no different. General Park. Hyun-woo led human forces that were as advanced as the fleet. His soldiers wore powered armor that made them nearly indestructible, supported by robot warriors designed by the brilliant Dr. Kim Na-young. Every human trooper was worth 100 alien soldiers, but the humans showed something the hegemony had never expected: mercy toward civilians. Colonel Yu Seok-jin established medical stations in captured cities, treating wounded aliens with the same care as human casualties. When alien civilians fled their homes in terror, expecting to be slaughtered, they found human soldiers offering food and protection instead. "Why are you helping us?" asked a young Vorthak, whose family had been trapped in the fighting. "Because children should never suffer for the crimes of their leaders," Colonel Yu replied, wrapping a bandage around the alien's injured arm. "We came here to stop the killing, not to continue it." The contradiction confused the hegemony species. They had expected humans to be like them, cruel conquerors who showed no mercy to the defeated. Instead, they found an enemy that fought with terrible efficiency, but treated prisoners with unexpected kindness. In space, the battle was reaching its climax. The hegemony fleet fought bravely, but they were fighting against technology and tactics they couldn't understand. Captain Ryu Sunmi's fighters moved through their formations like deadly angels, impossible to catch and impossible to escape. Commander Jang Ho-seok coordinated the missile frigates with inhuman precision. His ships fired guided weapons that could track targets across entire solar systems, turning and weaving through defensive fire to find their marks. Every shot was calculated by computers that could predict enemy movements before the aliens themselves knew what they would do. "Our shields are failing," reported a panicked officer on the hegemony flagship. Admiral Grixthak stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His 100,000 ships were being systematically destroyed by a force 1/7 their size. It should have been impossible. The humans were outnumbered 7-1, fighting in the heart of hegemony space, facing the strongest defenses in the galaxy, and they were winning. "Send a surrender signal," Grixthak ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Sir?" His communications officer looked shocked. "Send the signal! Cease fire! We surrender!" The surrender broadcast went out on all frequencies, but Admiral Kim's response was swift and final. 1 year after the hegemony's surrender, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. The old order of fear and oppression had crumbled, replaced by something that many species had thought impossible: hope. President Yoon Ji-woo stood at the podium in the newly built Galactic Council chamber, looking out at representatives from hundreds of worlds. Species that had lived under hegemony rule for centuries now sat as equals, their voices finally heard. The chamber buzzed with dozens of languages as beings who had once been enemies worked together to build a better future. "Today marks the first anniversary of the New Busan Liberation War," President Yoon began, her words translated instantly into every language in the galaxy. "Today, we remember not just the victory over tyranny, but the cost of that victory." The main screen showed images from New Busan before the attack. Children playing in parks that would never see another spring. Families building homes that would become graves. dreams that died in nuclear fire simply because the hegemony had decided human lives didn't matter. 2.5 million souls were lost because the old order believed that might made right, President Yoon continued. Today, we prove that justice and freedom are stronger than any weapon. In the audience, Supreme Chancellor Keth Moran sat with the other former hegemony, leaders awaiting trial. His crystalline form had grown dim over the past year, the weight of his crimes aging him in ways that surprised even his enemies. He had expected death or imprisonment. Instead, he found himself part of a justice system that sought truth rather than revenge. Judge Advocate General Seo Ye-jin had overseen the war crimes trials with fair but firm authority. The beings directly responsible for New Busan's destruction had been convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. Others, like Keth Moran, who had enabled the system but not ordered the specific attack, faced lesser charges. The human justice system confuses me, Keth Moran had told his lawyer, a young human woman who worked to ensure even war criminals received fair representation. You could have simply executed us all. Execution would be revenge, she had replied. Justice requires understanding why crimes happen and how to prevent them in the future. Now, as President Yoon spoke of reconciliation and rebuilt trust, Keth Moran wondered if his species had ever truly understood what justice meant. Admiral Kim Tae-ho, now promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander, maintained peace with a permanent force of 100,000 ships. The massive fleet was stationed at strategic points throughout the galaxy, ready to respond to any threat. But the real deterrent was not the ships themselves. It was the knowledge that humanity would never again allow innocents to be slaughtered by those who thought themselves superior. On the rebuilt world of New Busan, the Seku, Governor Park Min-seo stood before the memorial wall that bore the names of everyone who had died in the original colony. She had been elected by the survivors and new colonists who had come to rebuild what was lost. The new city was beautiful, with parks and schools and hospitals that served humans and aliens alike. They died as pioneers, Park said to the crowd, gathered for the memorial service. They are remembered as the catalyst for galactic freedom. Among the crowd stood beings from dozens of species, Vorthak children who had learned to play human games, crystalline ethereals who had discovered that music sounded different when shared with others, former hegemony soldiers who now served in the new Galactic Defense Force alongside the humans who had defeated them. Captain Lee Min-ho, one of the few who had survived the original attack by being off-world during the bombardment, now commanded the orbital defenses of New Busan II. His ships worked alongside former enemy vessels, their crews learning that cooperation was stronger than conquest. My daughter asked me yesterday why the bad aliens killed our old home, Lee told Park after the ceremony. I didn't know how to explain that sometimes people do terrible things because they're afraid of losing their power. What did you tell her? Park asked. That good people stopped them, and that will make sure it never happens again. The transformation hadn't been easy. Many species struggled to adapt to a galaxy where strength came from unity rather than domination. Some former hegemony worlds had tried to maintain their old ways, only to find themselves isolated and powerless in the new order. But most had embraced the change. Trade flourished between worlds that had once been forbidden to communicate. Scientific cooperation led to breakthroughs that benefited everyone. Art and culture spread across species barriers, creating new forms of beauty that no single race could have imagined alone. Dr. Nam Yuri, now Director of Galactic Integration, oversaw programs that helped former enemies work together. Her psychological warfare division had been transformed into a cultural exchange department, spreading understanding instead of fear. The hardest part, she told Ambassador Kang Soo-bin during one of their regular meetings, is helping species who have been enemies for centuries learn to trust each other. Trust is earned slowly, Kang replied. But it can be earned. The Vorthak Youth Corps is working with human engineers to restore damaged worlds. The ethereal musicians are teaching our children new songs. Every day, we build more bridges than walls. The economic transformation was equally dramatic. General Park Hyun-woo had overseen the conversion of military facilities into civilian infrastructure. Weapons factories became research centers. Military bases became hospitals and schools. The massive resources that had once been devoted to oppression were redirected toward improving life for everyone. Han Wu-jin and his engineering teams worked with alien scientists to develop new technologies that could benefit the entire galaxy. Faster-than-light communications that connected distant worlds, medical advances that saved lives across species barriers, environmental restoration techniques that brought dead worlds back to life. The irony, Han told his mixed-species research team, is that we learned more in 1 year of cooperation than in 50 years of secret development. Competition makes you strong, but collaboration makes you wise. Not everyone was happy with the new order. Some humans wanted to establish an empire, to rule the galaxy as the hegemony had done. Some aliens resented being liberated by a younger species. But these voices grew quieter each year as the benefits of the new system became undeniable. Commander Ko Yoon-seo, now captain of the exploration ship New Horizon, led joint missions to explore the unknown regions of the galaxy. Her crew included beings from a dozen different worlds, working together to discover new planets and new forms of life. The old hegemony saw exploration as conquest, she told her mixed crew as they approached an uncharted star system. We see it as discovery. Every new world is a chance to learn something wonderful. The greatest symbol of the new order was the Galactic Democratic Council itself. Representatives from hundreds of worlds met regularly to discuss problems and share solutions. Decisions were made by debate and vote rather than force and fear. President Yoon had surprised everyone, including her own advisors, by insisting that even former hegemony species have equal representation. The council chamber included beings who had once been humanity's greatest enemies, now working alongside their former victims to build a better future. Democracy is messy, Defense Minister Choi admitted during one particularly heated council session where representatives had argued for 6 hours about trade regulations. But it's the only system that gives everyone a voice. The alternative is what we fought to destroy, President Yoon replied. Better messy freedom than efficient tyranny. Fleet Admiral Bay, now in charge of training the new Galactic Defense Force, worked with officers from every species to create a military that served all rather than dominating all. Former enemies learned to fight alongside each other, united by the mission to protect the innocent rather than conquer the weak. The strongest weapon, he told his diverse group of cadets, is not the one that destroys the most enemies. It's the one that prevents enemies from existing in the first place. As the first anniversary of Liberation Day drew to a close, celebrations continued on worlds throughout the galaxy. On Earth, families watched fireworks that represented not victory in battle, but victory over hatred itself. On former hegemony worlds, beings who had lived in fear for generations celebrated their first year of true freedom. In space, Admiral Kim stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the peaceful stars. His fleet patrolled not as conquerors, but as guardians, ensuring that the strong could never again prey upon the weak without consequence. "Admiral," called his communications officer, "long-range sensors are detecting signals from the galactic rim. Unknown configuration, possibly a new species." Kim smiled. "Signal the exploration fleets. Time to make some new friends." On New Busan 2, Park Min-seo tucked her young daughter into bed. The child had been born on the new world, surrounded by friends from a dozen different species. She had never known a galaxy ruled by fear. "Mama," the little girl asked, "why do some of the grown-ups have scales and some have crystals and some look like us?" "Because the galaxy is big enough for everyone," Park replied, kissing her daughter's forehead. "And because your grandparents and all the other brave people who died taught the galaxy that everyone deserves to be free." Through the window, alien and human ships passed peacefully overhead.